fantasy novel. Right there, if you haven't seen it yet, so I understand they just arrived. In burning darkness, Basha wakes up in an abandoned insane asylum and has no idea why she is there, or why the doors and windows are barred shut, trapping her inside. As she searches for a way out, she finds the asylum's files, including her own, although she does not remember being diagnosed and admitted. Are the ghosts that haunt her real or imagined? Will she escape in time to find the truth and confront the doctor who left her there? Or will she die, trapped, alone, and confused? Jennifer Seitz lives in St. Louis and began writing urban fantasy novels during National Novel Writing Month in 2008. She also writes the occasional poem, story, and essay online. Please welcome Jennifer.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I actually know all of you, so you know me, obviously. So I'm going to read an excerpt from the book and then do a Q&A if anyone has any questions, and then I'll do the signing. And then afterwards, when we're all done here, we're going to go down to Blueberry Hill for drinks and appetizers, so I hope you can join us down at Blueberry Hill afterwards. Right. Chapter 1. As Basha reached for consciousness, something in the back of her mind told her to stay in the blissful, peaceful darkness enveloping her. She sensed nothing good would come from being awake. She fought, trying to remain asleep, but the force working against her won. She blinked a few times, then tried to rub her eyes, but she couldn't. Was she paralyzed? Anxiety began to seep in, so she forced herself to take slow, deep breaths. She wiggled her toes, then her fingers. No, not paralyzed, but why couldn't she move her arms and legs? Pressure on her wrists and ankles told her restraints held her down. If only it weren't so dark, if only she could see something, anything. Maybe she'd be able to figure out where she was. She was trapped in complete darkness, with no idea where she was or why. Panic took hold, and she screamed until her throat was raw, then continued screaming until she slipped back into unconsciousness. When Basha woke again, sun shone through the window. She looked around, taking stock of her surroundings. She was in some sort of hospital, though the other bed in her room was vacant. Silence permeated the building. Every time she'd been in a hospital to visit someone, the halls were filled with noises. Doctors giving orders to nurses, the beeping of various machines, the moaning of patients. Even in relatively quiet areas, there was always noise. The hum of fluorescent lights, a TV with the nightly news, a daughter reading a book to her elderly father. Sometimes, when Basha's head became too crowded, too much noise from the world scared her, inducing panic attacks. But now, the complete silence of this strange hospital was more terrifying than anything she had ever experienced. Basha hoped she could remain calm enough to remember why she was here. She'd been doing so well. It had been weeks since her last attack. She'd worked too hard for too long to return to having multiple attacks in a day. If she was ever going to have a normal life, she had to be stronger than the anxiety. But what was normal about waking up, strapped down to a bed in an abandoned hospital? She shouted for help, her throat still sore from screaming so much the night before, but she had to try to get someone's attention, had to find someone who would set her free. Why was she restrained? Weren't restraints for crazy people? People who were a danger to themselves or others? That wasn't her. Sure, sometimes the panic attacks made her feel like a danger to herself, but they were never anything that truly warranted restraints. She realized there was a saline drip in her arm. The bag was nearly empty, though, and how long would a saline drip really sustain her anyway if she didn't have real food and water? She had no idea. And couldn't the site of a needle puncture become infected if the needle was left in for too long? It seemed as if that's something she'd overheard a nurse say when her mother was in the hospital all those years ago, but she couldn't be certain. That was an uncertain time, which had led to an even more uncertain life. Basha tried to move her arms again, but made no progress. Next, she wiggled her feet around, hoping for more leeway there, but there was no room to try and force her foot out. She was trapped. A loud rumble from her stomach told her she needed to eat. It hadn't even been a full day since she'd woken up in this place, but how long had she been there before that? "Are you sure you want to know the answer?" a voice asked. "Who's there?" Basha called out. No one answered. Maybe she had imagined the voice. She tried to think about the last thing she could recall, hoping to find an inkling of what had happened to her. She remembered working the closing shift at the restaurant, where a coworker had once again been taunting her about her panic attacks. She'd had another that night when a customer complained to her manager about her poor service. It hadn't been Vasha's fault the cook screwed up the order, but the customer didn't care. He couldn't see the cook. Vasha was an easier target. He was obviously the type of person who belittled other people as a method of making himself feel superior. That didn't ease her mind, though. She was only thankful she had made it to the break room before completely losing it. But what had happened after that? She racked her brain, trying desperately to remember. Sometimes, with a bad panic attack, she didn't remember what happened for a short while during or after. Had that been one of those nights? Surely no one from the restaurant would have let her go home in that state. Now she remembered. It had been a mild attack, and she had gone home as usual. But try as she might, she couldn't remember anything after that. When had that been? She had no way to find out. Does anyone have any questions about my books or writing or me or anything? Nate?
When you begin to write a book, do your characters, is their personality and what their role is going to be already set in stone? Or as you're writing, does sometimes their personality or what they're going to be doing start to grow in a different way? And also, have you ever had to call upon the ghost of Angela Lansbury to help you with the writing?
They are definitely not set in stone. I have an idea of who they are and what their role is, but it often changes, or they'll grow into more than I had originally thought of. Sometimes characters that I didn't even plan to have in the book will just kind of pop up and take center stage. And no, I have never called on the ghost of Angela Lansbury. Sorry to disappoint you.
She is hot.
She's like 120 or something.
Are you going to write a sequel to that?
I don't know. There could be a sequel. I have an idea of what a sequel could be. I don't have any immediate plans to do so, but I think at some point there will be a sequel to this book.
Great.
I have about 2 or 3 others planned before that, though.
Do you continue to do NaNoWriMo?
I do. Last year I did not. I had some personal things going on that kept me away from it. I do plan to do it this year, though. The past, I think, 4 years I've been a municipal liaison for St. Louis. That's, if you're not familiar, National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, is every November, and the goal is to write a 50,000 word book in 30 days.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's fun. So municipal liaison is a local person who organizes local events. So I used to do that. I've stepped down this year because I don't have the time to fully devote to that. But I do plan to participate again.
That's good.
Yes.
Do you like writing series more, like the investigator series, or standalones, or are they just completely incomparable?
They're just different, yeah. I mean, I like both of them. Like I said, this one will probably have a sequel at some point. I do have a book that I kind of want to write, but I'm not sure that would be a standalone. I have 2 that would be a standalone if I ever get around to them. So they're just different, totally different beasts. You know, series are nice because you already have the characters established, so you don't have to do that bit, you know, in the world, you don't have to do that bit of world building and character building at the beginning. But standalones are nice too because you get something totally new and you get to have a whole new world.
When you did the investigator, oh, I'm sorry. When you did the investigator one, did you know it would be a series when you started the first one, or when you finished it, you're like, well, I'm not done with her. I'm going to do some more.
Yeah, I did not know. I didn't even know what it was going to be. I sat down the first day of NaNoWriMo that year and had like just the vaguest of ideas, and it ended up being about 90,000 words when I was done. And the characters just really, really took on a life of their own and just were like, no, this is not over. We have more to say and more to do, and there's so much more to happen. So I didn't plan it, but it definitely happened. Here.
Do you plan to stay within the urban fantasy genre, or can you see yourself moving to a different genre, and if so, which?
The next couple of books I have planned are I've got a couple in the series, a couple that are also more fantasy type. I have a few in my head that are totally different. So at some point I will stray, I'm sure, which is interesting because there's always the big debate of, you know, should you genre hop or not? Because people who only want the one genre, you're going to lose those fans. But I think if you're writing whatever, you know, like personally when there's an author I like, I'm going to read what they write no matter what genre for the most part. So at some point.
Right.
Yeah. Brandon?
I had a question. I'd like him to ask it because his voice is so great. Anyway, no, I hate to follow a guy like that. What's your loftiest goal as regards your books? Like, I know what your next goal might be. You know, if you want to sell a lot of books, whatever it might be. But what's your end game goal?
To appear on the radio, be a nice comment.
Appear on TV.
Yeah.
You guys need a TV show next.
Oh,
So.
there you go.
There's a goal for you. I want to make a living from my writing. I mean, if I'm a multimillionaire like J.K. Rowling, that would be great. You know, I'm not going to turn that down. But I just want to be able to live comfortably and, you know, be a full-time writer. So that may not be super lofty, but, you know, be able to travel when I want to and write all day if I want or all night. Nothing super crazy, but I wouldn't turn it down. Lee?
Besides your, month-long competition to write a book, how long does it normally take for you to write a book?
So most of the books that I've written so far, I've written pretty quickly. Divided, my first book was written during NaNoWriMo. Burning Darkness was written during Nano. Ravaged, I wrote shortly after Divided, and I wrote it within about 2 months, I think. I don't remember exactly. The next book I am writing, I'm hoping, I really hope to keep a really quick turnaround. My goal is to publish 2 books a year. I'm hoping to I really want the next book to be out the end of September because I'm going to be at Archon in October and I'd like to have 4 books to sell there. I only have 2 chapters written of it, so that one's going to be a really, really fast turnaround. But a couple of months to actually write it, and then there's the editing and all the revising and all the other fun stuff that goes along with it. Michael, did you have a question?
Oh, just staying in time,
I thought you were hands before. Were you just scratching your face or something?
I can't even recall.
All right.
Do you have a set routine for writing?
Sit down and write.
So there's no certain
Not
times of
really.
day, not.
No, I mean it's usually in the evenings. I have a day job. I'm trying to get myself into more of a routine so I can be more focused. But right now it's just when I get home from work after I settle and check the mail and whatnot, or on the weekends when I'm not playing Gypsy, wake up, have a cup of coffee, sit down, do some writing. So I don't have a really strict routine.
Okay.
Nate?
Do you purposely keep your books pretty concise? I mean, or can you see one getting 500, 1,000 pages? And do you use a typewriter like Angela Lansbury does?
I do not use a typewriter. I do not even own a typewriter. You already asked me this question. The answer's not going to change. I don't purposely keep them concise. I just keep them the length that the story needs to be told. So, Divided was a lot longer because it had a lot more story to be told, but I'm not going to try and pad it to make it longer just if there's nothing else to say, because that's going to be pretty obvious to the readers, I think, if I'm just padding it. So it's just whatever length it needs. So yeah, I might have one, but I don't know if I could write a 1,000-page book ever, but...
I mean, a book like this is very inviting because
right.
I know I can read this within a really short period of time.
Yeah, I don't know that I 6 months. There's some long baths you take. Yeah, it just depends on whatever the story ends up needing. So it's possible.
As a writer, what would be a challenge for you?
In the writing process.
Writing process, or maybe an idea, or for a novel, or I don't know. What would be a challenge for you as a writer?
Well, recently I've had the challenge of just starting the new book. I sat down and I planned a lot, and I kept just brainstorming and brainstorming and brainstorming some more, and I was like, all right, I need to stop and actually write the darn thing. And I don't know if I'm not entirely sure why that is, if it's just kind of a fear that it's not going to be good. But I went to, I couldn't focus, so I finally just made myself go out to the coffee shop one night, and I turned my phone off and just sat down and made myself start writing. So getting started can be a challenge at times. Once I'm in a story, then it's pretty easy to keep writing. Coming up with ideas is not a problem, sometimes fleshing them out to be an actual novel-length story. Because sometimes there's a story that just doesn't need a whole novel, it might just be a short story.
Do you think you'll ever do a collection of short stories?
I've thought about it. I have a couple short stories and poems and essays and things that I've written. I've thought about putting them together when I have a few more, so that, yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah. What other authors do you admire and why?
Well, my original influence was Laurel K. Hamilton. Early days of Laurel K. Hamilton, not so much newer stuff. No offense to her, because this will probably be on the internet, and hopefully she doesn't see that, but I'll edit that out. I like the more badass Anita in her earlier novels. I'm not as fond of the romantic turn the series took. It's just not my style as much. Kat Richardson she's not as well known. She writes urban fantasy. I talked to her on Twitter and stuff online a little bit, so it's really cool to have authors actually talk to you, respond to your tweets and things. That's always a fun thing.
Sure.
I'm just drawing a total blank on that
That's
right
all right.
now.
That's awesome.
So would you say you would prefer less romance in a story? Or does it matter either way?
I mean, it doesn't matter. If it fits the story, then it's fine. I'm not personally as big a fan of reading romance books, so I prefer a little less. I mean, I do like romance. I like some of it to be there, but
Not the whole story.
yeah. And I don't know if you've read Laurel Hamilton, but so in her later books, it doesn't feel like it really fits like this with the story. It feels kind of contrived. So I don't want something to be extremely contrived, but if it fits, then it's fine. I'll read anything. If someone recommends me a book and it's a genre I've never read before, I'll read it if I get a good recommendation, even if it is a straight up romance, even though it's not typically my genre.
Do you find you put a lot of yourself or maybe events that you might have seen or known into your writing?
Not really, not directly. My characters are definitely not me. People ask me that all the time. Oh, are you Elena or are you Basha? No, not really. I'm sure there's aspects of me in them, but for the most part, there's always going to be the subconscious. We draw from experiences and what we've lived through. So there's always going to be some of it, but I don't directly write through direct experiences that I've had. Natalie Goldberg is another influence.
Heard that name.
Yeah. I really like her. She does a lot more memoir and nonfiction. But her book, Writing Down the Bones, is really good for authors.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Well, thank you, everyone.
There are no more questions, right? I didn't see. Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming. There are copies of the book available up here or down at the counter. Just pay for it before you walk out the door. And we will set up a signing table up here for her. And That's it. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.